Recently, I made a video about agriculture, the future of agriculture, and basically how we think about that when someone is making an argument about what form of agriculture, what systems will make up the future of agriculture, what's sustainable, what's impractical, about how that's kind of a difficult question. Basically, when you're asking that question, we're dealing with a very complex system. And so in that video, I talked about it. The whole earth, the whole ecosystem of the earth, the economic systems, the agricultural systems, the human systems of the earth is just immensely complicated. And so when someone is advocating for some agricultural system, basically it's really common that they're using logical fallacies. They're not taking everything into account. And actually it's pretty much every time, or it is every time that someone's making an argument related to this kind of thing, that they're not taking everything into account, because we're just dealing with a system that is so complex that's absolutely impossible. And so that's why when someone says, oh, industrial agriculture is necessary for the future because it's efficient, it's such a limited perspective. You're not taking into account, for example, efficiency over the next 200 years, how the negative effects ecologically are going to make things less efficient and less profitable, if that's the metric you're going by. And so if someone's making that argument, really they're assuming that profitability is the metric we should go for. They're assuming what calculations they're using to calculate how profitable something is, and that they're using that paradigm to reinforce their belief. Likewise, with any other system, someone is going to be using the same kind of logical fallacy. So that video was kind of the background for this video, and that was basically a steel man for the argument that we have no fucking idea what works. This video is going to be more so about why food forestry might be a really good solution for the future, along with different organic, annual agricultural methods and other forms of agriculture, permaculture, whatever it may be. Basically, because we are aware that we can't take everything into account, because we are aware that these systems are so complex that there's no way to quantify them, to put them into a formula, that whatever variable you add changes the formula. Because of that, we're going to stay aware of that and just say, well, maybe we should add as many variables as possible. So when you look at something as simple as the output of a system compared to the economical costs, including labor, materials, obviously that doesn't make any sense. The next layer of factors we could put in are the future, which is very hard to predict. This is kind of crazy because it's so hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what's going to happen to these different systems that we're taking into account in the future. By the way, we are out here at Point Doom in Malibu. Got some fog over there. And over on the other side, it's completely sunny. So anyways, getting into the video, as far as food forestry, what would the arguments be that food forestry as a system of agriculture is effective? And basically, we're going to be looking at multiple ROIs, multiple outputs for why this would be a sustainable system. One thing, we're going to just list off a bunch of things that kind of come together. So on the downside of food forestry, there is a lot of upfront investment as far as labor, materials, in order to establish food forest systems. That would be the big downside. And they take time to mature, 3 to 5 years to start really producing fruit. Now let's go list off a bunch of things that could be good. And obviously, there's no simple equation. But when you start to see how this works in conjunction with a bunch of other systems, you'll start to see why food forests might be kind of a no-brainer. At least at some level, more than they're used now. So when a food forest is established, they can last for hundreds of years without maintenance. This is an agricultural system that can exist without maintenance compared to industrial agriculture, where there is constant maintenance, and that annual maintenance is actually damaging the soil. With a food forest, there is no maintenance or very little, but there can be no maintenance, and it's improving the soil on its own. So as far as industrial agriculture, whatever calculations you're running, the fact of the matter is, at a certain point in 60 years, that soil is going to be so depleted, we can't even grow anything on it with chemicals. So when you look at a food forest, it's improving the soil on its own. So just that ecologically is a massive benefit. It's also providing ecological habitat, food, habitat for bees, birds, all of these crucial species, wherever they exist, without maintenance, on its own, as a standalone system. Now, with the food forest, you have to harvest it. That's the labor. You go pick some fruit. In an hour, someone can pick so much fruit. Someone could pick many hundreds of dollars worth of fruit in an hour. And they could maybe even do it faster than they would go to the grocery store. Someone with a peach tree in their yard is going to be able to go out in an hour, pick a bunch of peaches worth hundreds of dollars, and maybe they could even go out and eat a peach faster than they could eat from a kitchen. They just go outside and they just eat peaches. So it can be, if we have these small pockets of food forests, these integrated systems around schools and people's yards, it can be the case that the labor is actually less. And even if we have a giant food forest and people go on the weekend, take a couple hours, pick their fruit for the year, they pay someone gets paid to go pick it and make a bunch of jam, whatever it may be. The cost of that, because all you're doing is harvesting, is going to be orders of magnitude less than other agricultural systems to extract food from that system, from that food forest system. So you can see that if we just had a bunch of food forests in place, the cost of food, the quality of food would be crazy, more efficient, higher quality. The environmental effects would be amazing with little work going into that. So when you look at the effects of food forests, you can see that long term, and obviously all these systems we're talking about, we don't know what's going to happen long term, but you can kind of envision this reality where these food forest systems are always being established in small amounts, whatever we can afford to do. We're establishing these systems, expanding these systems, and when they're in place, it's a really efficient system, a lot of positive effects, and very sustainable long term. Now, these are going to grow a lot of fruit, a lot of medicinal plants, some different perennial vegetables, but in conjunction with this, you would still need annual vegetable farming. Now, there are ways to do this with row cropping, with organic market gardening that are very efficient. There are different tools that can be used, for example, on a 30-inch row of crops that are very efficient but aren't doing the same damage that industrial agriculture is doing. So if you take industrial agriculture, we're using these massive tractors, tilling the soil, plowing the soil, using herbicides, pesticides, and artificial fertilizers to basically prop up the system. All of these, their advantage is that it's extremely efficient. One person can produce a massive amount of calories with a certain amount of money and labor. Now, with these other systems, we can still use tools, but do it in a way that's not damaging the soil, where we're building soil over time, so that over time, this system is improving the environmental quality of the area. And if you just look at it as simple as the amount of calories produced per the amount of labor and cost, it's not going to compare. But when you look at it as far as sustainability, long term, the current environmental effects to the local environment, to the global environment, when you look at the health of the food, how that affects the cost of the healthcare system when people are eating healthier food, and you factor all that into the equation, you'll see that if it's like, even if it's 3 times as much labor per amount of calories for this super high quality 20 different kinds of vegetables compared to just a shit ton of corn, it obviously adds up. So when you look at the future of agriculture, we're talking about establishing these food forest perennial systems that are very low maintenance, have a very high long-term payoff. As far as vegetable farming, you can get a massive payoff within 3 to 5 years. You don't have to wait for these systems to mature over time because the upfront investment is far lower. So I think we need a mix of these systems. When you're looking at these systems and someone makes an argument about the lack of efficiency, you need to realize all the factors you're not taking into account. Industrial agriculture isn't efficient at all because it's impossible to keep doing it. Basically, it's taking advantage of the resources that are built into the soil from natural ecosystems, draining those resources, and in about 60 years, the soil is going to be so depleted that even with it being propped up by chemicals, we're still not going to be able to grow things in it. So it's completely inefficient. It's not even viable whatsoever as a long-term strategy. It produces shit food that destroys our health, causes massive costs as far as the healthcare costs, health insurance, hospitals, and obviously even without the cost of that, it sucks that people are sick. That's not a good thing. So you got to factor all of this shit into the equation, and even then, this is still a simplistic perspective. It's impossible to factor everything into the equation. But be wary of very simple arguments about what is good for the future of agriculture. We need to, as we install these systems, analyze them, be experimental, see what actually works, see how efficient different systems are, take into account as much as we can, be open-minded to the idea that the equations you're using to analyze the viability of these systems might not be good. But you can kind of have a picture now for why a system where food forests are all over in people's yards, in schools, giant food forests that form big agricultural systems that go into grocery stores. You can kind of see why that, in conjunction with organic 30-inch row cropping with regenerative no-till soil practices, you can see how it would easily be done. You could easily feed people. People say that AI is going to take people's jobs and we're not going to have enough labor. If we just took a couple % of the population and put them into regenerative farming practices, we could completely revamp the ecosystems, regenerate the soil that's been destroyed. It's much more efficient per square footage, so a bunch of farmland could be converted back into the native ecosystems, improving ecological health, creating natural areas. Labor is not an issue. We can get the labor. Economically, we can get the labor. It's just a matter of putting it towards these systems. People who say we don't have the labor to do anything that takes more time than a giant tractor farming 100 acres with one person is kind of stupid. It doesn't make sense. So be very wary of these arguments. I kind of got into the same topics as the other video, but this one is more advocating for these systems and kind of giving you a picture of what that might look like. Anyways, peace. I'll say one more thing. If you want me to install these systems for you, that's what I do. I build food forests. I'm happy to do annual vegetable crop installation, installing those systems. That's my expertise. That's what I specialize in, is understanding and installing these sustainable, healthy, regenerative agricultural systems. So if you want to learn more about that, if you want me to build those for you, message me on Instagram at eternal.harvest, and I'll build one of these systems for you. Or just design it and tell you how to build it yourself. Peace.